All right, we are coming up on 8 o'clock. So let's go ahead and settle in, get comfortable, and get back to our book. Welcome back. This is our fourth night reading from The Adventures of Tom Sawyer by Mark Twain. This one has been interesting. It's kind of a mix between a children's book and a relatively simple novel. You get the charm and the fun of just kids being kids, but at the same time we get the adult perspective of looking in and seeing just how much of little shits they can really be. It's an interesting juxtaposition, but it's fun nonetheless. This is probably one of the better places to start with Mark Twain, but it is generally not accepted as his best. It's good, but as far as if we're talking about like an actual like launching point for American literature, Huck Finn is usually more well received. But you got to start somewhere, right? And this is really where things started getting off the ground for Mark Twain. Before this, he'd done a lot of periodicals, pieces in newspapers, magazine. Well, most of the newspapers, there weren't really magazines at the time, but things in periodicals and odd bits here and there. This is one of his first long format writings, so it's good to get a little bit of an understanding of where he's coming from, and it is still fun. As you're right, as you say, we were all once little shits. That's just life. Yeah, exactly. This sets it all up. It introduces Huck. They're not, the one isn't a sequel to the other, but it sort of sets the stage. Huck is a more serious work, I'd say. This is lighthearted and still fun. Things are happening, and you're really getting a view into the times better than you do in a lot of period works. Seeing the community and the world through a child's eyes is a unique perspective that we don't see very often. So it's refreshing. It's nice. Alright, that's enough pre-book banter out of me for now. We have about a little bit more, or a little bit less than 40% of the book left. Given that there's probably some wrap-up at the trail end of this, and just by virtue of how the pages are laid out, we will probably finish this one on our Friday reading. In all likelihood, it might end up being a little bit of a long reading on Friday, just so that we can make it fit, because there is no way we can fit this into 3 days. So, let's just enjoy it tonight. Take our pace relatively easy, and then Friday, if we have to go long, we have to go long. It's not going to be the end of the world. So, let's resume tonight with Chapter 23. At last, the sleepy atmosphere was stirred, and vigorously. The murder trial came on in the court. It became the absorbing topic of the village talk immediately. Tom could not get away from it. Every reference to the murder sent a shudder to his heart, for his troubled conscience and fears almost persuaded him that these remarks were put forth in his hearing as feelers. He did not see how he could be suspected of knowing anything about the murder, but still, he could not be comfortable in the midst of this gossip. It kept him in a cold shiver all the time. He took Huck to a lonely place to have a talk with him. It would be some relief to unseal his tongue for a little while, to divide his burden of distress with another sufferer. Moreover, he wanted to assure himself that Huck had remained discreet. Huck, have you ever told anybody about that? About what? You know what? Oh, of course I haven't. Never a word, never a solitary word, so help me. What makes you ask? Well, I was afeard. Why, Tom Sawyer, We wouldn't be alive 2 days if that got found out. You know that. Tom felt more comfortable. After a pause, Huck, they couldn't anybody get you to tell, could they? Get me to tell? Why? If I wanted that half-breed devil to drown me, they could get me to tell. There ain't no different way. Well, that's all right then. I reckon we're safe as long as we can keep mum. But let's swear again anyway. It's more sure. I'm agreed. So they swore again with dread solemnities. What is this? What is this talk around, Huck? I've heard of power of it. Talk? Well, it's just Muff Potter all the time. He keeps me in a sweat, constantly. So's I want to hide summers. That's just the way they go on around me. I reckon he's a goner. Don't you feel sorry for him sometimes? Most always. Most always. He ain't don't count, but then he ain't never done anything to hurt anybody. Just fishes a little to get money to get drunk on, and loafs around considerable, but Lord, we all do that, leastways, most of us. Preachers and such like. But he's kind of good. He gave me half a fish once when there wasn't enough for two, and lots of times he's kind of stood by me when I was out of luck. Well, he's mended kites for me, Huck, and knitted hooks onto my line. I wish we could get him out there. My, we couldn't get him out, Tom. And besides, 'twouldn't do any good. They'd catch him again. Yes, so they would. But I hate to hear him abuse him so like the Dickens when he never done that. I do too, Tom. Lord, I hear him say he's the bloodiest looking villain in this country. They wonder he wasn't ever hung before. Yes, they talk like that all the time. I've heard him say that if he was to get free, they'd lynch him. And they'd do it too. The boys had a long talk, but it brought them little comfort. As the twilight drew on, they found themselves hanging about the neighborhood of the little isolated jail, perhaps with an undefined hope that something would happen that might clear away their difficulties. But nothing happened. There seemed to be no angels or fairies interested in this luckless captive. The boys did as they had done often before, went to the cell grating, and gave Potter some tobacco and matches. He was on the ground floor, and there were no guards. His gratitude for their gifts had always smote their consciences before. He cut deeper than ever this time. They felt cowardly and treacherous to the last degree when Potter said, "You've been mighty good to me, boys. Better than anybody else in this town. I don't forget it. I don't often I says to myself, I used to mend all the boys' kites and things and show them where the good fishing places was and befriend them what I could. Now they've all forgot old Muff when he's in trouble. But Tom don't, and Huck don't. They don't forget him, says I, and I don't forget them. Well, boys, I done an awful thing, drunk and crazy at the time. That's the only way I account for it. Now I got to swing for it. And it's right. Right and best, too, I reckon. Hope so, anyway. Well, we won't talk about that. I don't want to make you feel bad. You befriended me. But what I want to say is, don't you ever get drunk. Then you won't ever get here. Stand a little further west. So, that's it. It's a prime comfort to see faces as friendly when a body's in such a muck trouble. They don't none come here but yourn. Good friendly faces. Good friendly faces. Get up on another's back and let me touch them. That's it. Shake hands. Yourn will come through the bars, but mine's too big. Little hands. Weak. But they've helped Muff Potter power. And they'd help him more if they could. Tom went home miserable, and his dreams that night were full of horrors. The next day and the day after, he hung about the courtroom, drawn by an almost irresistible impulse to go in, but forcing himself to stay back. Huck was having the same experience. They studiously avoided each other. Each wandered away from time to time, but the same dismal fascination always brought them back presently. Tom kept his ears open when idlers sauntered out of the courtroom, but invariably heard distressing news. The toils were closing more and more relentlessly around poor Potter. At the end of the second day, the village talk was to the effect that Injun Joe's evidence stood firm and unshaken, and that there was not the slightest question as to what the jury's verdict would be. Tom was out late that night, and came to bed through the window. He was in a tremendous state of excitement. It was hours before he got to sleep. All the village flocked to the courthouse the next morning, for this was to be the great day. Both sexes were about equally represented in the packed audience. After a long wait, the jury filed in and took their places. Shortly afterward, Potter, pale and haggard, timid and hopeless, was brought in, with chains upon him, and seated where all the curious eyes could stare at him. No less conspicuous was Injun Joe, stolid as ever. There was another pause, and then the judge arrived, and the sheriff proclaimed the opening of the court. The usual whisperings among the lawyers and the gathering together of papers followed. These details and accompanying delays worked up an atmosphere of preparation that was as impressive as it was fascinating. Now, a witness was called who testified that he found Muck Potter washing in the brook at an early hour of the morning that the murder was discovered, and that he immediately sneaked away. After some further questioning, counsel for the prosecution said, "Take the witness." The prisoner raised his eyes for a moment, but dropped them again when his own counsel said, "I have no questions to ask him." The next witness proved the finding of the knife near the corpse. Counsel for the prosecution said, "Take the witness." "I have no questions to ask him," Potter's lawyer replied. A third witness swore he had often seen the knife in Potter's possession. "Take the witness." Counsel for Potter declined to question him. The faces of the audience began to betray annoyance. Did this attorney mean to throw away his client's life without an effort? Several witnesses deposed concerning Potter's guilty behavior when brought to the scene of the murder. They were allowed to leave the stand without being cross-questioned. Every detail of the damaging circumstances that occurred in the graveyard upon that morning, which all present remembered so well, was brought out by credible witnesses, but none of them were cross-examined by Potter's lawyer. The perplexity and dissatisfaction of the House expressed itself in murmurs and provoked in a reproof from the bench. Counsel for the prosecution now said, "By the oaths of citizens, whose simple word is above suspicion, we have fastened this awful crime, beyond all possibility of question, upon the unhappy prisoner at the bar. We rest our case here." A groan escaped from poor Potter. He put his face in his hands and rocked his body softly to and fro, while a painful silence reigned in the courtroom. Many men were moved, and many women's compassion testified itself in tears. Counsel for the defense rose and said, "Your Honor, in our remarks at the opening of this trial, we foreshadowed our purpose to prove that our client did this fearful deed while under the influence of a blind and irresponsible delirium produced by drink. We have changed our mind. We shall not offer that plea." Then to the clerk, "Call Thomas Sawyer!" A puzzled amazement awoke in every face in the house, not even excepting Potter's. Every eye fastened itself with wondering interest upon Tom as he rose and took his place upon the stand. The boy looked wild enough, for he was badly scared. The oath was administered. "Thomas Sawyer, where were you on the 17th of June, about the hour of midnight?" Tom glanced at Injun Joe's iron face, and his tongue failed him. The audience listened breathless. The words refused to come. After a few moments, however, the boy got a little of his strength back, and managed to put enough of it into his voice to make part of the house here. In the graveyard. A little louder, please. Don't be afraid. You were in the graveyard. A contemptuous smile flitted across Injun Joe's face. Were you anywhere near Horse William's grave? Yes, sir. Speaker, just a trifle louder. How near were you? Near as I am to you. Were you hidden or not? I was hid. Where? Behind the elms. It's on the edge of the grave. Injun Joe gave a barely perceptible start. Anyone with you? Yes, sir. I went there with... Wait a moment. Never mind mentioning your companion's name. We will produce him at the proper time. Did you carry anything there with you? Tom hesitated and looked confused. Speak out, my boy. Don't be dipping it. The truth is always respectable. What did you take there? Only a dead cat. There was a ripple of mirth, which the court checked. We will produce the skeleton of that cat. Now, my boy, tell us everything that occurred. Tell it in your own way. Don't skip anything, and don't be afraid. Tom began, hesitatingly at first, but as he warmed to his subject, his words flowed more and more easily. In a little while, every sound ceased but his own voice. Every eye fixed itself upon him. With parted lips and bated breath, the audience hung upon his words, taking no note of time, wrapped in the ghastly fascinations of the tale. The strain upon pent emotion reached its climax when the boy said, and as the doctor fetched the board around and Muff Potter fell, Injun Joe jumped with the knife and crash! Quick as lightning, the half-breed sprang for a window, tore his way through all oppressors, and was gone. That is the end of chapter 23. Well, it seems that probably both boys had the same mind that they couldn't keep silent, and so quietly went into the defense. At least that's my guess. Because if he knows there's another, and he knows who it is, and he'll call him in time, it's both of them. But, Injun Joe was on the loose. So we were wondering when this would all come back and we'd get a little bit of, plot. It's been a lot of vignettes and side stories and just boys' whimsy. But now we're getting into the meat of it. And it's, only 2/3 of the way through the book. We've been drip-fed a little bit, but it's alright. I was getting a little pissed at the defense lawyer there for a while. Just letting the, yeah, exactly. They're little shits, but they're good kids. And they're understandably terrified. Like, they watched Injun Joe kill a man. This is a little bit before witness protection program. So, it's a real danger to step forward like this. So, it's understandable. So no one's blaming the kids, but man, as the prosecution was laying out their arguments, and then the defense just no questions. Oh, I was getting a little bit heated there. All right, let's continue with this pace with chapter 24. Tom was a glittering hero once more. The pet of the old, the envy of the young, his name even went into immortal print. For the village paper magnified him. There were some that believed he would be president yet, if he escaped hanging. As usual, the fickle, unreasoning world took Muff Potter to its bosom, and fondled him as lavishly as it had abused him before. But that sort of conduct is to the world's credit. Therefore, it is not well to find fault with it. Tom's days were days of splendor and exultation to him, but his nights were seasons of horror. Injun Joe infested all his dreams, and always with doom in his eye. Hardly any temptation could persuade the boy to stir abroad and after nightfall. Poor Huck was in the same state of wretchedness and terror, for Tom had told the whole story to the lawyer the night before the great day of the trial, and Huck was sore afraid that his share in the business might leak out. Yet, notwithstanding Injun Joe's flight had saved him the suffering of testifying in court. The poor fellow had got the attorney to promise secrecy, but what of that? Since Tom's harassed conscience had managed to drive him to the lawyer's house by night and wring a dread tale from the lips that had been sealed with the dismalest and most formidable of oaths, Huck's confidence in the human race was well nigh obliterated. Daily, Muff Potter's gratitude made Tom glad he had spoken, but nightly he wished he had sealed up his tongue. Half the time, Tom was afraid Injun Joe would never be captured. The other half, he was afraid he would be. He felt sure he never could draw a safe breath again until that man was dead and he had seen the corpse. Rewards had been offered. The country had been scoured, but no Injun Joe was found. One of those omniscient and awe-inspiring marvels, a detective, came up from St. Louis, moused around, shook his head, looked wise, and made that sort of astounding success which members of that craft usually achieve. That is to say, he found a clue. But you can't hang a clue for murder. And so, after that detective had got through and gone home, Tom felt just as insecure as he was before. Slow days drifted on, and each left behind it a slightly lightened weight of apprehension. That's a short chapter there. That's the end of chapter 24, wherein we see a little bit of Mark Twain's bias come out. He's not a fan of detectives, it seems. He's got a pretty optimistic view of the world. The fickleness of the world is, it can be to its benefit, where it'll turn on you one day, but when it decides that it's fine to turn back, you'll be welcomed back with open arms. That's a little bit optimistic and a little bit pessimistic all at once, but it's reasonable. It's a reasonable take. All right, let's continue on with chapter 25. There comes a time in every rightly constructed boy's life when he has a raging desire to go somewhere and dig for hidden treasure. This desire suddenly came upon Tom one day. He sallied out to find Joe Harper, but failed of success. Next, he sought Ben Rogers. He had gone fishing. Presently, he stumbled upon Huck Finn, the red-handed. Huck would answer. Tom took him to a private place and opened the matter to him confidentially. Huck was willing. Huck was always willing to take a hand in any enterprise that offered entertainment and required no capital, for he had a troublesome superabundance of that sort of time, which is not money. "Where'll we dig?" said Huck. "Oh, most anywhere." "Why, is it hid all round?" "No, indeed it ain't. It's hid in mighty particular places, Huck. Sometimes on islands, sometimes in rotten chests under the end of a limb of an old dead tree, just where the shadow falls at midnight, but mostly under the floor in haunted houses." "Who hides it?" "Why, robbers, of course. Who'd you reckon? Sunday school superintendents?" "Oh, I don't know. If it was mine, I wouldn't hide it. I'd spend it and have a good time." "So would I. The robbers don't do that way. They always hide it and leave it there." "Don't they come after it no more?" "No. They think they will, but they generally forget the marks, or else they die. Anyway, it lays there a long time and gets rusty, and by and by, somebody finds an old yellow paper, tells them how to find the marks. A paper that's got to be ciphered over about a week, because it's mostly signs and hieroglyphics." Which? Hieroglyphics. Pictures and things, that don't seem to mean anything. Have you got one of them papers, Tom? No. Well then, how are you going to find the marks? I don't want any marks. They always bury it under a haunted house or an island, or under a dead tree that's got one limb sticking out. Well, we tried Jackson's Island a little. We can try it again sometime. And then there's the old haunted house up on Steelhouse Branch. There's a lot of dead limb trees. Dead loads of them. Is it under all of them? How you talk? No. Then how are you going to know which one to go for? Go for all of them. Why, Tom, it'll take all summer. Well, what are they? Suppose you find a brass pot with $100 and all rusty and gray. A rotted chest full of diamonds. How's that? Huck's eyes glowed. There's bully. Plenty of bully enough for me. Just you give me the $100. I don't want no diamonds. All right. But I bet you ain't going to throw up on diamonds. Some of them's worth $20 a piece. There ain't any. Hardly. What's worth 6 bits or $1. No. Is that so? Certainly. Anybody will tell you so. Ain't you ever seen one, Huck? Not as I remember. Oh, kings have slathers of them. Well, I don't know no kings, Tom. I reckon you don't. But if you was to go to Europe, you'd see a raft of them hopping around. Do they hop? Hop? Yo, granny, no! Well, what'd you say they did for? Shucks, I only meant you'd see them, not hopping, of course. What do they want to hop for? But I mean, you just see them scattered around, you know, in a kind of general way. Like that old humpback Richard. Richard? What's his other name? He didn't have any other names. Kings don't have any but a given name. No, but they don't. Well, if they like it, Tom, all right. But I don't want to be a king and only have a given name like a Negro. But hey, where are you going to dig first? Well, I don't know. Suppose we tackle that old dead limb tree on the hill to the other side of the Steelhouse Branch. I'm agreed. So they got a crippled pick and a shovel and set out on their 3-mile tramp. They arrived hot and panting and threw themselves down in the shade of a neighboring elm to rest and have a smoke. I like this, said Tom. So do I. Say, Huck, if we find a treasure here, what are you going to do with your share? Well, I'll have a pie and a glass of soda every day, and I'll go to every circus that comes along. I bet I'll have a gay time. Well, ain't you going to save any of it? Save it? What for? Why, so as to have something to live on by and by. Oh, that ain't any use. Pap would come back and this year town someday and get his claws on it. And if I didn't hurry up, I tell you, he'd clean it out pretty quick. What you gonna do with yourn, Tom? I'm gonna buy a new drum and a sure enough sword and a red necktie and a bullpup and get married. Married? That's it. Tom, you ain't in your right mind. Wait, you'll see. Well, that's the foolish thing you could do. Look at Pap and my mother. Fight! Why, they used to fight all the time. I remember mighty well. That ain't nothing. The girl I'm going to marry won't fight. Tom, I reckon they're all alike. They'll all call me body. Now, you better think about this a while. I tell you, you better. What's the name of the gal? It ain't a gal at all. It's a girl. It's all the same, I reckon. Some says gal, some says girl. Both's right, like enough. Anyway, what's her name, Tom? I'll tell you sometime. Not now. All right, that'll do. Only, if you get married, I'll be more lonesomer than ever. No, you won't. You'll come and live with me. Now, stir out of this and we'll get to digging. They worked and sweated for half an hour. No result. They toiled another half hour. Still no result. Huck said, they always bury as deep as this? Sometimes. Not always. Not generally. I reckon we haven't got the right place. So they chose a new spot and began again. The labor dragged a little, but still they made progress. They pegged away in silence for some time. Finally, Huck leaned on the shovel, swabbed the beaded drops from his brow with his sleeve, and said, where are you going to dig next, after we get this one? I reckon maybe we'll tackle the old tree that's over yonder on Cardiff Hill, back of the widow's. I reckon that'll be a good one. But won't the widow take it away from us, Tom? It's on her land. Does she take it away? Maybe she'd like to try it once. Whoever finds one of these hid treasures, it belongs to him. It don't make any difference whose land it's on. That was satisfactory. The work went on. By and by, Huck said, "Blame it, we must be in the wrong place again. What do you think?" "It is mighty curious, Huck. I don't understand it. Sometimes witches interfere. I reckon maybe that's what's the trouble now." "Shucks. Witches ain't got no power in the daytime." "Well, that's so. I didn't think of that. Oh, I know what the matter is. What a blame lot of fools we are. You got to find out where the shadow of the limb falls at midnight, and that's where you dig." "Then, consound it, we fooled all this work for nothing. Nah, hang it all. We got to come back in the night. It's an awful long way. You get out?" "I bet I will. We got to do it tonight, too, because if somebody sees these holes, they'll know in a minute what's here, and they'll go for it." "Well, I'll come around in a mile tonight." "All right. Let's hide the tools in the bushes." The boys were there that night, about the appointed time. They sat in the shadow waiting. It was a lonely place, and an hour made solemn by old traditions. Spirits whispered in the rustling leaves. Ghosts lurked in the murky nooks. The deep baying of a hound floated up out of the distance. An owl answered with his sepulchral note. The boys were subdued by these solemnities, and talked little. By and by, they judged that 12 had come. They marked where the shadow fell, and began to dig. Their hopes commenced to rise. Their interest grew stronger. Their industry kept pace with it. The hole deepened and still deepened. But every time their hearts jumped to hear the pick strike upon something, they only suffered new disappointment. It was only a stone or a chunk. At last Tom said, "It ain't any use, Huck. We're wrong again." "Well, but we can't be wrong. We spotted the shadow to a duck." "I know it, but then there's another thing." "What's that?" "Why, we only guessed at the time. Like enough it was too late or too early." Huck dropped his shovel. "That's it," said he. "That's the very trouble. We got to give this one up. We can't ever tell the right time. And besides, this thing's kind of too awful. Here this time of night with witches and ghosts fluttering around, so I feel as if something's behind me all the time. And I'm afraid to turn around, because maybe there's others in front and waiting for a chance. I've been creeping all over ever since I got here." "Well, I've been pretty much so too, Huck. They almost always put in a dead man when they bury a treasure under a tree to look out for it." "Lordy!" "Yes, they do. I've always heard that. Tom, I don't like to fool around much where there's dead people. A body's bound to get in trouble with them, sure. I don't like to stir him up either. Suppose this one here was to stick his skull out and say something." "Don't, Tom, it's awful." "Well, it just is, Huck. I don't feel comfortable a bit. Say, Tom, let's give this place up and try somewhere else." "All right, I reckon we better." "What'll it be?" Tom considered a while, and then said, "The haunted house. That's it." "Blame it, I don't like haunted houses, Tom. Why, they're a darn sight worse than dead people. Dead people might talk, maybe, but they don't come sliding around in their shroud when you ain't noticing, and peep over your shoulder all of a sudden and grit the teeth the way a ghost does. I couldn't stand such a thing as that, Tom. Nobody could." "Yes, but Huck, ghosts don't travel around only at night. They won't hinder us from digging there in the daytime." "Well, that's so. But you know mighty well people don't go about that haunted house in the day nor the night." "Well, that's mostly because they don't like to go where a man's been murdered anyway. But nothing's ever been seen around that house except in the night. Just some blue light slipping by the windows. No regular ghosts." "Well, if you see one of them blue lights flickering around, Tom, you can bet there's a ghost mighty close behind it. It stands to reason, because you know that they don't anybody but ghosts use them." "Yes, that's so. But anyway, they don't come around in the daytime, so what's the use of our being afeared?" "Well, all right. We'll tackle the haunted house if you say so. But I reckon it's taking chances." They had started down the hill by this time. There, in the middle of the moonlit valley below them, stood the haunted house. utterly isolated, its fences gone long ago, rank weeds smothering the very doorsteps. The chimney crumbled to ruin, the window sashes vacant, a corner of the roof caved in. The boys gazed a while, half expecting to see a blue light flit past a window. Then, talking in a low voice, as befitted the time and the circumstances, they struck far off to the right, to give the haunted house a wide berth, and took their way homeward through the woods that adorned the rearward side of Cardiff Hill. That brings us to the end of chapter 25. Well, I'm rather certain that they're not going to be finding treasure in that house. I don't know about you. There's a few persons that I think it might be a little bit more likely. These dialogue-heavy chapters are kind of murder on me, though. That's I tried to tone down the accents. I do reasonably well at it, but when Tom talks to Huck, both of them dig deep in that dialect, and it is like word for word on the page as written. It comes out like that, which is trying, shall we say? All right, we're making good progress tonight. It is just not about 20 till. So let's continue on. We can get another 2 chapters into this rate before we have to take a break. So let's go on and see what is to be found next with chapter 26. About noon the next day, the boys arrived at the dead tree. They had come for their tools. Tom was impatient to go to the haunted house. Huck was measurably so, also, but suddenly said, "Look here, Tom. Do you know what day it is?" Tom mentally ran over the days of the week, and then quickly lifted his eyes with a startled look in them. "My, I never once thought of it, Huck." "Well, I didn't either. All at once, it popped onto me that it was Friday." "Blame it, a body can't be too careful, Huck. We might have got into awful scrape tackling such a thing on a Friday. Might. Better say we would. There's some lucky days maybe, but Friday ain't." "Any fool knows that. I don't reckon you was the first that found it out, Huck." Yeah, you got the advantage of me there. I grew up Midwestern, which is awful close to accentless. Every once in a while I have a few words that'll trip up on me, but for the most part it's pretty close to like broadcaster dialect. So that's to my benefit for these narrations, but when I get into a character it gets a little awkward sometimes, because I don't have a good southern accent. Just sorry to break it to you, this isn't a good one. Where were we? Well, I never said I was, did I? And Friday ain't all neither. I had a rotten bad dream last night. Dreamt about rats. No. Sure shine of trouble. Did they fight? No. Well, that's good, huh? When they don't fight, it's only a sign there's trouble around, you know. All we got to do is to look mighty sharp. Keep out of it. We'll drop this thing for today and play. Do you know Robin Hood, Huck? No. Who's Robin Hood? Why, he was one of the greatest men that was ever in England. And the best. He was a robber. Crack. I wished I was. Who'd he rob? Only sheriffs and bishops and rich people and kings and such like. But he never bothered the poor. He loved them. He always divided up with them perfectly square. Well, he must have been a brick. I bet you he was, Huck. Oh, he was one of the noblest men that ever was. There ain't any such men now. I can tell you. You could lick any man in England with one hand tied behind him. You could take his U-bow and plug a 10-cent piece every time. A mile and a half. What's a U-bow? I don't know. Some kind of bow, of course. If he hit that dime on the edge, he would sit down and cry and curse. But we'll play Robin Hood. It's not be fun. I'll learn you. I'm agreed. So they played Robin Hood all the afternoon, now and then casting a yearning eye down upon the haunted house and passing a remark about the morrow's prospects and possibilities there. As the sun began to sink into the west, they took their way homeward athwart the long shadows of the trees, and soon were buried from sight in the forests of Cardiff Hill. On Saturday, shortly after noon, the boys were at the dead tree again. They had a smoke and a chat in the shade, and then dug a little in their last hole, not with great hope, but merely because Tom said there were so many cases where people had given up a treasure after getting down within 6 inches of it, and then somebody else had come along and turned it up with a single thrust of a shovel. The thing failed this time, however, so the boys shouldered their tools and went away feeling that they had not trifled with fortune, but had fulfilled all the requirements that belong to the business of treasure hunting. When they reached the haunted house, there was something so weird and grisly about the dead silence that reigned there under the baking sun, and something so depressing about the loneliness and desolation of the place that they were afraid for a moment to venture in. Then they crept to the door and took a trembling peep. They saw a weed-grown, floorless room, unplastered, an ancient fireplace, vacant windows, a ruinous staircase, and here and there, and everywhere, hung ragged and abandoned cobwebs. They presently entered, softly, with quickened pulses, talking in whispers, ears alert to catch the slightest sound, the muscles tense and ready for instant retreat. In a little while, familiarity modified their fears, and they gave the place a critical and interested examination, rather admiring their own boldness, and wondering at it too. Next, they wanted to look upstairs. This was something like cutting off retreat, but they got to daring each other, and of course, there could be but one result. They threw their tools into a corner and made the ascent. Up there were the same signs of decay. In one corner, they found a closet that promised mystery, but the promise was a fraud. There was nothing in it. Their courage was up now and well in hand. They were about to go down and begin work when, "Shh," said Tom. "What is it?" whispered Huck, blanching with fright. "Shh, there, hear it?" "Yes." "Oh my, let's run." "Keep still, don't you budge. We're right toward the door." The boys stretched themselves upon the floor with their eyes to knot-holes in the planking, and lay waiting in a misery of fear. They stopped. "No, coming? Here they are. Don't whisper another word, Huck. My goodness, I wish I was out of this." 2 men entered. Each boy said to himself, "There's the old deaf and dumb Spaniard that's been about town once or twice lately. Never saw the other man before." T'other was a ragged and unkempt creature with nothing very pleasant in his face. The Spaniard was wrapped in a serape. He had bushy white whiskers, long white hair flowed from under his sombrero, and he wore green goggles. When they came in, T'other was talking in a low voice. They sat down on the ground, facing the door, with their backs to the wall. The speaker continued his remarks. His manner became less guarded and his words more distinct as he proceeded. "No," said he, "I thought it all over. I don't like it. It's dangerous." "Dangerous," grunted the deaf and dumb Spaniard, to the vast surprise of the boys. "Milksop." This voice made the boys gasp and quake. It was Injun Joe's. There was silence for some time. Then Joe said, "What's any more dangerous than that job up yonder? Nothing's come of it. It is different. Way up the river so, and not another house about. 'Twon't ever be known that we tried anyway, as long as we don't succeed. Well, that's more dangerous than coming up here in the daytime. Anybody would suspicion us that saw us." "I know that. There weren't any other places handy after that fool job. I want to quit this shanty. I wanted to yesterday, only it wasn't any use trying to stir out of here with those infernal boys playing over there on the hill right in full view. Those infernal boys quaked again under the inspiration of this remark, and thought how lucky it was that they had remembered it was Friday and concluded to wait a day. They wished in their hearts they had waited a year. The two men got out some food and made a luncheon. After a long and thoughtful silence, Injun Joe said, "Look here, lad. You go back up the river where you belong. Wait there till you hear from me. I'll take the chances on dropping into this town just once more for a look. We'll do that dangerous job after I spot around a little and think things look well for it. Then, for Texas, we'll lay it together." This was satisfactory. Both men presently fell to yawning, and Injun Joe said, "I'm dead for sleep. It's your turn to watch." He curled down in the weeds and soon began to snore. His comrade stirred once or twice, and he became quiet. Presently the watcher began to nod. His head drooped lower and lower. Both men began to snore now. The boys drew a long, grateful breath. Tom whispered, "Now's our chance. Come." Huck said, "I can't. I'd die if they was to wake." Tom urged. Huck held back. At last, Tom rose slowly and softly and started alone. But the first step he made wrung such a hideous creak from the crazy floor that he sank down almost dead with fright. He never made a second attempt. The boys lay there counting the dragging moments, till it seemed to them that time must be done and eternity growing gray. And then they were grateful to note that at last the sun was setting. Now, one snore ceased. Injun Joe sat up, stared round, smiled grimly upon his comrade, whose head was drooping upon his knees, stirred him up with his foot and said, "Here, you're all a watchman, ain't you? All right, though, nothing's happened. Why, have I been asleep? Oh, partly. Nearly time for us to be moving, Pod. We'll see what we do with that little swag we got left. I don't know. Leave it here as we have always done, I reckon. We used to take it away till we start south. 650 silver's something to carry. We're all right. Won't better to come here soon once more." "No, but I'd say come to the night, as we used to. It's better." "Yes, but look here. It may be a good while before I get the right chance at that job. Accidents might happen. It ain't in such a very good place. We'll just regularly bury it. Bury it deep." "Good idea," said his comrade, who walked across the room, knelt down, raised one of the rearward hearthstones, and took out a bag that jingled pleasantly. He subtracted from it $20 or $30 for himself, and as much for Injun Joe, and passed the bag to the latter, who was on his knees in the corner, now digging with his bowie knife. The boys forgot all their fears, all their miseries, in an instant. With gloating eyes, they watched every movement. The splendor of it was beyond all imagination. $600 was money enough to make a half a dozen boys rich. Here was treasure hunting under the happiest auspices. There would not be any bothersome uncertainty as to where to dig. They nudged each other every moment, eloquent nudges and easily understood, for they simply meant, "Oh, but you ain't glad now we're here." Joe's knife struck upon something. "Hello," said he. "What is it?" said his comrade. "Half rotten plank." "Nah, it's a box, I believe. Here, bare hand and we'll see what it's in here." "Never mind, I broke a hole." He reached his hand in and drew it out. "It's money." The two men examined the handful of coins. They were gold. The boys above were as excited as themselves and delighted. Joe's comrade said, "We'll make quick work of this. There's an old rusty pick over amongst the weeds in the corner of the outside of the fireplace. Saw it a minute ago." He ran and brought the boys' pick and shovel. Injun Joe took the pick, looked it over critically, shook his head and muttered something to himself, and then began to use it. The box was soon unearthed. It was not very large. It was iron-bound and had been very strong before the slow years had injured it. The men contemplated the treasure a while in blissful silence. "Pard, there's $1,000 here," said Injun Joe. "It was always said that Myrtle's gang used to be around here one summer," the stranger observed. "I know it," said Injun Joe, "and this looks like it, I'd say." "Now, you won't need to do that job." The half-breed frowned. Said he, "You don't know me. You don't know all about that thing. It ain't robbery altogether. It's revenge." And a wicked light flamed in his eyes. "I need your help in it. When it's finished, then Texas. Go home to your Nancy and your kids, and stand by till you hear from me." "Well, if you say so. What do we do with this? Bury it again?" "Yes." Ravishing delight overhead. "No! By the great Sachem, no!" Profound distress overhead. "I'd nearly forgot. That pick had fresh earth on it." The boys were sick with terror in a moment. What business has a pick and a shovel here? What business with fresh earth on them? Who brought them here? Where are they going? You heard anybody? Seen anybody? What? Buried again and leave them here and see the ground disturbed? Nah, not exactly. Not exactly. We'll take it to my den." "Why, of course. Might have thought of that before." "You mean number 1? "No. Number 2. Under the cross. The other place is bad. Too common." "All right. Nearly dark enough to start." Injun Joe got up and went about from window to window, cautiously peeping out. Presently he said, "Who could have brought those tools here? Do you reckon they can be upstairs?" The boy's breath forsook them. Injun Joe put his hand on his knife, halted a moment, undecided, and then turned toward the stairway. The boys thought of the closet, but their strength was gone. The steps came creaking up the stairs. The intolerable distress of the situation woke the stricken resolution of the lads. They were about to spring for the closet, when there was a crash of rotten timbers, and Injun Joe landed on the ground amid the debris of the ruined stairway. He gathered himself up, cursing. His comrade said, "Now, what's the use of all that? If it's anybody and they're up there, let them stay there. Who cares? If they want to jump down now and get into trouble, who objects? It'll be dark in 15 minutes, and then let them follow us if they want to. I'm willing. In my opinion, whoever hove those things in here caught sight of us and took us for ghosts or devils or something. I'll bet they're running yet." Joe grumbled a while. Then he agreed with his friend that the daylight was left ought to be economized in getting things ready for leaving. Shortly afterward, they slipped out of the house in the deepening twilight and moved toward the river with their precious box. Tom and Huck rose up, weak but vastly relieved, and stared after them through the chinks between the logs of the house. Follow? Not they. They were content to reach ground again, and without broken necks, and take the townward track over the hill. They did not talk much. They were too much absorbed in hating themselves, hating the ill luck that made them take the spade and the pick there. But for that, Injun Joe never would have suspected. He would have hidden the silver with gold to wait there till his revenge was satisfied, and then he would have had the misfortune to find that money turn up missing. Bitter, bitter luck that the tools were ever brought there. They resolved to keep a lookout for that Spaniard who should come to town spying out for chances to do his revengeful job, and follow him to number 2, wherever that might be. Then a ghastly idea occurred to Tom. "Revenge? What if he means us, Huck?" "Oh, don't," said Huck, nearly fainting. They talked it all over, and as they entered town, they agreed to believe that he might possibly mean somebody else. At least, he might at least mean nobody but Tom, since only Tom had testified. Very, very small comfort it was to Tom to be alone in danger. Company would be a palpable improvement, he thought. And that is the end of chapter 26. Well, it wasn't exactly an insightful guess that they were going to find something besides treasure. I was more surprised that there was treasure. That was a surprise. I didn't remember that from any of the adaptations. Makes sense. It's an old house that's been abandoned for years, and there's been gangs in the area. It makes sense that somebody's stashing things, especially if the gang had been caught up or knocked out at some point. So, but wow, thousands of dollars in a box. Even today, thousands of dollars would be like real money. Then, man, you could buy a whole town for thousands of dollars. Oh yeah, I vaguely remember that scene, but I didn't remember them finding the extra money. Like I remember them hiding out of sight and like while they're arguing down below, but I didn't remember the specifics of it. It has been quite a while. All right, the next one is about 4 or 5 pages. Let's go ahead and get one more chapter in, and then we'll take a quick break. Get some resolution to everything that's been going on here. So, chapter 27. Oh, don't do me like that. Don't do me like that. About 30 years, my ass. No, the 90s is just a few years ago, man. Just a few years ago. Let me live in my delusion. All right, as long as we're suffering together. All right. The adventure of the day mightily tormented Tom's dreams that night. 4 times he had his hands on that rich treasure, and 4 times it wasted to nothingness in his fingers as sleep forsook him and wakefulness brought back the hard reality of his misfortune. As he lay in the early morning, recalling the incidents of his great adventure, he noticed that they seemed curiously subdued and far away, somewhat as if they had happened in another world, or in a time long gone by. But then it occurred to him that the great adventure itself must be a dream. There was one very strong argument in favor of this idea, namely, that the quantity of coin he had seen was too vast to be real. He had never seen as much as $50 in one mass before, and he was like all boys of his age and station in life, in that he imagined that all references to hundreds and thousands were mere fanciful forms of speech, and that no such sums really existed in the world. He had never supposed for a moment that so large a sum as $100 was to be found in actual money in anyone's possession. If his notions of hidden treasure had been analyzed, they would have been found to consist of a handful of real dimes and a bushel of vague, splendid, ungraspable dollars. But the incidents of his adventure grew sensibly sharper and clearer under the attrition of thinking them over. And so he presently found himself leaning to the impression that the thing might not have been a dream after all. This uncertainty must be swept away. He would snatch a hurried breakfast and go and find Huck. Huck was sitting on the gunwale of a flatboat, listlessly dangling his feet in the water and looking very melancholy. Tom concluded to let Huck lead up to the subject. If he did not do it, then the adventure would be proved to have been only a dream. "Hello, Huck." "Hello yourself." Silence for a minute. "Tom, if we'd have left the blamed tools at the dead tree, we'd have got the money." "Oh, ain't it awful?" "'Tain't a dream, then." "'Tain't a dream? Somehow I've most wished it was." "Dogged if I don't, Huck." "What ain't a dream?" "Oh, the thing yesterday. I've been half thinking it was." "Dream? If them stairs hadn't broke down, you'd have seen how much dream it was." I've had dreams enough all night. That petch-eyed Spanish devil going for me all through 'em. Rot him." "No, not rot him. Find him. Track the money." "Tom, we'll never find him." Fella don't have only one chance for such a pile, and that one's lost. I'd feel mighty shaky if I was to see him anyway. Well, so'd I. But I'd like to see him anyway and track him out to his number 2. Number 2. Yeah, that's it. I've been thinking about that, but I can't make nothing out of it. What do you reckon it is? I don't know. It's too deep. Say, Huck, maybe it's the number of a house. Goody. No, Tom, that ain't it. If it is, it ain't in this one-horse town. There ain't no numbers here. Well, that's so. Let me think a minute. Here, it's the number of a room. In a tavern, you know. Oh, that's the trick. There ain't only 2 taverns. We can find out quick. You stay here, Huck, till I come. Tom was off at once. He did not care to have Huck's company in public places. He was gone half an hour. He found that in the best tavern, number 2 had long been occupied by a young lawyer, and was still so occupied. In the less ostentatious house, number 2 was a mystery. The tavern keeper's young son said it was kept locked all the time, and he never saw anybody go into it or come out of it except at night. He did not know any particular reason for this state of things. Had some little curiosity, but it was rather feeble. Had made the most of the mystery by entertaining himself with the idea that the room was haunted. Had noticed that there was a light in there the night before. That's what I found out, Huck. I reckon that's the very number 2 we're after. Reckon it is, Tom. Now, what you gonna do? Let me think. Tom thought a long time. Then he said, I'll tell you. The back door of that number 2 is the door that comes out into that little close alley between the tavern and the old rattle-trap of a brick store. Now, you get hold of all the door keys you can find, and I'll nip all the antes. And the first dark night, we'll go there and try him. Mind you, keep a lookout for Injun Joe, because he said he was going to drop into town and spy around once more for a chance to get his revenge. If you see him, you just follow him. And if he don't do that, number 2, that ain't the place. Lordy, I don't want to follow him by myself. Why, it'll be all right, sure. It'll be nice, sure. He might never see you. And if he did, maybe he'd never think anything. Well, if it's pretty dark, I reckon I'll track him too. I don't know. I'll try. You bet I'll follow him. If it's dark, Huck. Why, he might have found out he couldn't get his revenge. He's going right after that money. It's so, Tom. It's so. I'll follow him. I will, by jingoes. Now we're talking. Don't you ever weaken, Huck, and I won't. All right, and that brings us to the end of chapter 27. Let's go ahead and take a few minutes now to stand up, stretch your legs, top up our drinks, refresh your cups, and we'll be back in just a little while where we'll continue with, presumably, well, judging by the picture that's on this next one, we might be dancing around a few words in this next chapter. We'll see. So, be back in a bit. I gotta brace myself for this one. All right, we are back. Actually, as I was looking through and seeing some odds and ends, doing some housekeeping before we got back, I did not realize we've had, I think as of today, 108 videos up on the channel now. That's actually pretty impressive. We've stuck through it pretty flippin' well. So, here's to 100 more, right? Alright, let's go ahead and get back into it. Actually, while we're having a little bit of a meta here, if you've not yet, we're going to drop this one in the middle of the reading instead of at the end. If you've not yet, I request, bring up the idea. Go ahead and drop a like on the stream. If you haven't yet, go ahead and subscribe to the channel if you could. Lets us know we're doing fun things, and lets the algorithm know to send people our way. And it puffs up my ego a little bit when I see the number go up. To be honest, I'm a simple man. I think I missed a couple days early on with there were some family medical events, so I was spending like the whole weekend in and out of the hospital, so I think we missed a day or two in that. But other than that, yeah, I think it's just the day after the marathon was the only day we've missed otherwise. So I think it helps that we keep it to about a 2-hour stretch is very manageable, very reasonable. I could probably do about 3 or 4 at a sitting, and have like, I know usually people recommend doing like the 3 to 4 hour long streams, but honestly, for this format, I think 2 is just about the sweet spot. You get enough that you can really get into the material, and you don't kill the narrator. Both important keys. But I think we might do some longer ones from time to time. Maybe we'll get into a habit of once a month or so do a 4-hour or so. Nothing like a full-on marathon like we did for the birthday stream, but we'll see. It might be fun just to do some big ones every once in a while, though. That's my idea, yeah. Because it's with gaming, it's one like because there's things that are happening. It keeps the attention, but you're not always talking. You're not listening. You don't have to pay attention the whole time. If you see something fun is happening, you take a look at the screen and you're good. For this sort of thing, it's like an audiobook. You usually don't go into huge stretches of it at a time. Although I will admit, the last time I did an audiobook was, I may have done, 4 6-hour stretches of listening to it, because it was while I was doing other work, and you know how it goes. Eventually the headphones die and you're just like, oh man, what time is it? Alright, let's go ahead and get back to it. We've got a few chapters ahead of us tonight, and we're about at we are right at the 75% mark through the book. So that leaves us with, probably by the end of tonight, we'll be a little over 80, which gives us right into the 20% to get through on Friday to get us a nice, clean ending. So I'm enjoying this pace, and we are looking like we will hit our targets for this book. So let's continue now and jump back into it with chapter 28. That night, Tom and Huck were ready for their adventure. They hung about in the neighborhood of the tavern until after 9, one watching the alley at a distance, and the other the tavern door. Nobody entered the alley or left it. Nobody resembling the Spaniard entered or left the tavern door. The night promised to be a fair one, so Tom went home with the understanding that if a considerable degree of darkness came on, Huck was to come and meow, whereupon he would slip out and try the keys. But the night remained clear, and Huck closed his watch and retired to bed in an empty sugar hogshead about 12. Tuesday, the boys had the same ill luck. Also Wednesday, but Thursday night promised better. Tom slipped out in good season with his aunt's old tin lantern and a large towel to blindfold it with. He hid the lantern in Huck's sugar hogshead, and the watch began. An hour before midnight, the tavern closed up, and its lights, the only ones thereabouts, were put out. No Spaniard had been seen. Nobody had entered or left the alley. Everything was auspicious. The blackness of darkness reigned. The perfect stillness was interrupted only by occasional mutterings of distant thunder. Tom got his lantern, lit it in the hogshead, wrapped it closely in the towel, and the two adventurers crept in the gloom toward the tavern. Huck stood sentry, and Tom felt his way into the alley. Then there was a season of waiting, anxiety that weighed upon Huck's spirits like a mountain. He began to wish he could see a flash from the lantern. It would frighten him, but it would at least tell him that Tom was alive yet. It seemed hours since Tom had disappeared. Surely he must have fainted. Maybe he was dead. Maybe his heart had burst under terror and excitement. In his uneasiness, Huck found himself drawing closer and closer to the alley, fearing all sorts of dreadful things, and momentarily expecting some catastrophe to happen that would take away his breath. There was not much to take away, for he seemed only to be able to inhale it by thimblefuls, and his heart would soon wear itself out, the way it was beating. Suddenly there was a flash of light, and Tom came tearing by him. "Run!" said he. "Run for your life!" He needn't have repeated it. Once was enough. Huck was making 30 or 40 miles an hour before the repetition was uttered. The boys never stopped till they reached the shed of a deserted slaughterhouse at the lower end of the village. Just as they got within its shelter, the storm burst and rain poured down. As soon as Tom got his breath, he said, "Huck, it was awful. I tried 2 of the keys just as soft as I could, but they seemed to make such a power racket that I couldn't hardly get my breath. I was so scared. They wouldn't turn in the lock either. But, well, without noticing what I was doing, I took hold of the knob, and the door, open comes the door. It weren't locked. I hopped in, shook off the towel, and great Caesar's ghost!" What'd you see, Tom? "Huck! I most stepped onto Injun Joe's hand." "No." "Yes. He was lying there, sound asleep on the floor, with his old patch on his eye and his arms spread out." "Lordy, what'd you do? Did he wake up?" "No. Never budged. Drunk, I reckon. I just grabbed that towel and started." "I'd never thought of the towel, I bet." "Well, I would. My aunt would make me mighty sick if I lost it. Say, Tom, did you see that box?" "Huck, I didn't wait to look around. I didn't see the box. I didn't see the cross. I didn't see anything but a bottle and a tin cup on the floor by Injun Joe. Yes, I saw 2 barrels and lots more bottles in the room. Don't you see now? What's the matter with that haunted room? Here. Why, it's haunted with whiskey. Maybe all the temperance taverns have got a haunted room, huh? Say, Huck?" "Well, I reckon maybe that's so. Who'd have thought such a thing? But say, Tom, now's a mighty good time to get that box, if Injun Joe's drunk." It is, that. You try it." Huck shuddered. "Well, no, I reckon not." "And I reckon not, Huck. Only 1 bottle alongside Injun Joe ain't enough. If there'd been 3, he'd be drunk enough and I'd do it." There was a long pause for reflection, and then Tom said, "Looky here, Huck. Let's not try that thing any more till we know Injun Joe's not in there. It's too scary. Now, if we watch him every night, we'll be dead sure to see him get out sometime or other, and then we'll snatch that box quicker than lightning." "Well, I'm agreed. I'll watch the whole night long, and I'll do it every night, too, if you'll do the other part of the job." "All right, I will. All you got to do is to trot up Hooper Street, a block and mile. And if I'm asleep, You throw some gravel at the window, and that'll fetch me. Agreed. And good as wheat. Now, Huck. Storm's over, and I'll go home. It'll begin to be daylight in a couple hours. You go back and watch that long, will you? I said I would, Tom, and I will. I'll haunt that tavern every night for a year. I'll sleep all day, and I'll stay and watch all night. That's all right. Now, where are you going to sleep? In bed where I'll just halo. He lets me. And so does his Pap's Negro man, Uncle Jake. I tote water for Uncle Jake whenever he wants me to. And anytime I ask him, he gives me a little something to eat if he can spare it. That's a mighty good Negro, Tom. He likes me, so I don't ever act as if I was above him. Sometime I've sat right down and eat with him. You need to tell that. Body's got to do things when he's awful hungry. You wouldn't want to do as a steady thing. Well, if I don't want you in the daytime, I'll let you sleep. I won't come bothering around. Anytime you see something's up in the night, just skip right around and meow. All right, that is the end of chapter 28. And here we see a bit of a hint of what the sort of the tones of Huckleberry Finn, the root of his character. There's more to him than just kind of a country tramp. Consider the timing. This is before the Civil War. So to associate with at this point, we must assume a local slave that's like tantamount to pariah behavior. But I mean, treating him as, yeah, he doesn't say that he enjoys his company, but he treats him as a person, which is better than most people of the time, and especially in the rural areas like this. And it kind of gives you some spark into who Huck is. Like, he's been down and out pretty much his whole life. He's effectively an orphan, and so from his perspective, he's got a little bit of a clearer perspective than a lot of the other folks around the town, the highfalutin folk. So, and that becomes the driving force of his character in his own book. But we see it here, which is really, it's kind of nice. It's something that carries through in a lot of Mark Twain's writings, is that people are more than necessarily meets the eye. And backwoods country folk sometimes have the best eyes to look through. Yeah, exactly. It's you can see some of their interactions and things are colored toward certain interactions, but that is because they have been taught these things as they go, but not all of it has been ingrained in them yet. They see a person and they are like to trust them or to interact with them without having that predisposition. And so that's another part of it. Like, this book pounds on the notes, keys in, and like rings home that so many of these experiences are timeless and just forever. Whether you take them out of the time window that it was written in or into today, it's an experience that is shared across the ages. And hate and prejudice and all that is a learned behavior, not just, it's not ingrained at all. And that is awesome, that even in the 1800s, when things were at their worst, Mark Twain and a lot of others saw that and pointed it out, that kids don't start out this way, or start out, you know what I mean. So it's good. I love to see it, even if it means that I have to have some quick on the fly word substitutions to fit the, well, at this point it's not for fear of cancellation or anything, it's just for my own discomfort. I have a hard line on a very few specific words that I just won't approach. And that, yeah, that's what that is. All right, let's see. Lordy. Yeah, getting. Oh, it's blowing up on me. Yeah, for sure. I don't think I've stumbled a lick on any of these so far. They haven't been as rapid fire as some of them, so that's nice. It's just slipped in here and there, and you can pretty well understand that the usual substitution is every time. The euphemism, the acceptable term, is not in the text even once so far as I've seen. It's all the hard one. So you see it on the page and it's like wince, because you know it's coming. All right, let's go ahead and get back to it. We can get through another 2 chapters or so tonight and get us up past the 80% mark, and we will see what further trouble the boys get up to, because they're watching now. But now that there's been some motion, I think we're probably past due for a little bit of nothing. So this might be a chapter that kind of sits and spins its wheels a little bit, maybe. All right, chapter 29. The first thing Tom heard on Friday morning was a glad piece of news. Judge Thatcher's family had come back to town the night before. Both Injun Joe and the treasure sunk into secondary importance for a moment, and Becky took the chief place in the boy's interest. Okay, well, I may have called that without even reading the page. He saw her, and they had an exhausting good time playing Hispy and Gully Keeper with a crowd of their schoolmates. The day was completed and crowned in a peculiarly satisfactory way. Becky teased her mother to appoint the next day for the long-promised and long-delayed picnic, and she consented. The child's delight was boundless, and Tom's not more moderate. The invitations were sent out before sunset, and straight away the young folks of the village were thrown into a fever of preparation and pleasurable anticipation. Tom's excitement enabled him to keep awake until a pretty late hour, and he had good hopes of hearing Huck's bow, and of having his treasure to astonish Becky and the picnickers with the next day. But he was disappointed. No signal came that night. Morning came eventually, and by 10 or 11 o'clock, a giddy and rollicking company were gathered at Judge Thatcher's, and everything was ready for a start. It was not the custom for elderly people to mar the picnics with their presence. The children were considered safe enough under the wings of a few ladies of 18 and a few young gentlemen of 23 or thereabouts. The old steam and ferry boat was chartered for the occasion. Presently the gay throng filed up the main street laden with provision baskets. Sid was sick and had to miss the fun. Mary remained at home to entertain him. The last thing Mrs. Thatcher said to Becky was, "You'll not get back till late. Perhaps you'd better stay all night with some of the girls that live near the ferry landing, child." "Then I'll stay with Susie Hopper, Mama." "Very well. And mind you behave yourself and don't be any trouble." Presently, as they tripped along, Tom said to Becky, "Say, I'll tell you what we'll do. Instead of going to Joe Harper's, we'll climb right up the hill and stop at Widow Douglas. She'll have ice cream. She has it most every day, dead loads of it, and she'll be awful glad to have us. Oh, that will be fun." Then Becky reflected a moment and said, "But what will Mama say? How'll she ever know?" The girl turned the idea over in her mind and said reluctantly, "I reckon it's wrong, but shucks. Your mother won't know, so what's the harm? And all she wants is that you'll be safe, and I bet you she'd have said go there if she'd have thought of it. I know she would. The Widow Douglas's splendid hospitality was a tempting bait. It and Tom's persuasions presently carried the day. So it was decided to say nothing to anybody about the night's program. Presently it occurred to Tom that maybe Huck might come this very night and give the signal. The thought took a deal of the spirit out of his anticipations. Still, he could not bear to give up the fun at Widow Douglas's. And why should he give it up? He reasoned. The signal did not come the night before, so why should it be any more likely to come tonight? The sure fun of the evening outweighed the uncertain treasure, and boylike he determined to yield to the stronger inclination, and not allow himself to think of the box of money another time that day. 3 miles below town, the ferryboat stopped at the mouth of a woody hollow and tied up. The crowd swarmed ashore, and soon the forest distances and craggy heights echoed far and near with shoutings and laughter. All the different ways of getting hot and tired were gone through with, and by, the rovers straggled back to camp, fortified with responsible appetites. And then the destruction of the good things began. After the feast, there was a refreshing season of rest and chat in the shade of spreading oaks. By, somebody shouted, "Who's ready for the cave?" Everybody was. Bundles of candles were procured, and straightway there was a general scamper up the hill. The mouth of the cave was up the hillside, an opening shaped like a letter A. Its massive oaken door stood unbarred. Within was a small chamber, chilly as an icehouse, and walled by nature with solid limestone that was dewy with cold sweat. It was romantic and mysterious to stand here in the deep gloom and look out upon the green valley shining in the sun. But the impressiveness of the situation quickly wore off, and the romping began again. The moment a candle was lighted, there was a general rush upon the owner of it. A struggle and a gallant defense followed, but the candle was soon knocked down or blown out. And then there was a glad clamor of laughter and a new chase. But all things have an end. By the procession went filing down the steep descent of the main avenue, the flickering rank of lights dimly revealing the lofty walls of rock almost to their point of junction 60 feet overhead. The main avenue was not more than 8 or 10 feet wide. Every few steps, other lofty and still narrower crevices branched from it on either hand. For McDougal's cave was but a vast labyrinth of crooked aisles that ran into each other and out again and led nowhere. It was said that one might wander days and nights together through its intricate tangle of rifts and chasms, and never find the end of the cave, and that you might go down and down and still down into the earth, and it was just the same, labyrinth under labyrinth. No end to any of them. No man knew the cave. That was an impossible thing. Most of the young men knew a portion of it, and it was not customary to venture beyond this known portion. Tom Sawyer knew as much of the cave as anyone. The procession moved along the main avenue some 3/4 of a mile, and then groups and couples began to slip aside into branch avenues, fly along the dismal corridors, and take each other by surprise at points where the corridors joined again. Parties were able to elude each other for the space of half an hour without getting beyond the known ground. By, one group after another came straggling back to the mouth of the cave, panting, hilarious, smeared from head to foot with tallow drippings, daubed with clay, and entirely delighted with the success of the day. Then they were astonished to find that they had been taking no note of time, and that night was about at hand. The clanging bell had been calling for half an hour. However, this sort of close to the day's adventures was romantic, and therefore satisfactory. When the ferry boat with her wild freight pushed into the stream, nobody cared sixpence for the wasted time but the captain of the craft. Huck was already upon his watch when the ferryboat's lights went glinting past the wharf. He heard no noise on board, for the young people were as subdued and still as people usually are, who are nearly tired to death. He wondered what boat it was, and why she did not stop at the wharf. And then he dropped her out of his mind, and put his attention upon his business. The night was growing cloudy and dark. 10 o'clock came, and the noise of vehicles ceased. Scattered lights began to wink out, all straggling foot passengers disappeared. The village betook itself to its slumbers, and left the small watcher alone with the silence and the ghosts. 11 o'clock came, and the tavern lights were put out. Darkness everywhere now. Huck waited what seemed a very long time, but nothing happened. His faith was weakening. Was there any use? Was there really any use? Why not give it up and turn in? A noise fell upon his ear. He was all attention in an instant. The alley door closed softly. He sprang to the corner of the brick store. The next moment, 2 men brushed by him, and one seemed to have something under his arm. It must be that box! So they were going to remove the treasure. Why call Tom now? It would be absurd. The men would get away with the box and never be found again. No, he would stick to their wake and follow them. He would trust to the darkness for security from discovery. No communing with himself. Communing with himself, Huck stepped out and glided along behind the men, with bare feet, allowing them to keep just far enough ahead not to be invisible. They moved up the river street 3 blocks, then turned to the left up Cross Street. They then went straight ahead until they came to the path that led up Cardiff Hill. This they took. They passed by the old Welshman's house, halfway up the hill without hesitating, and still climbed upward. Good, thought Huck. They'll bury it in the old quarry. But they never stopped at the quarry. They passed on up the summit. They plunged into the narrow path between the tall sumac bushes, and were at once hidden in the gloom. Huck closed up and shortened his distance now, but they would never be able to see him. He trotted along a while, then slackened his pace, fearing he was gaining too fast. Moved on a piece, then stopped altogether. Listened. No sound. None. Save that he seemed to hear the beating of his own heart. The hooting of an owl came over the hill. Ominous sound. But no footsteps. Heavens, was everything lost? He was about to spring with winged feet when a man cleared his throat, not 4 feet from him. Huck's heart shot into his throat, but he swallowed it again. And then he stood there, shaking, as if a dozen agues had taken charge of him at once. So weak that he thought he must surely fall to the ground. He knew where he was. He knew he was within 5 steps of the stile leading into the Widow Douglas's grounds. Very well, he thought. Let them bury it there. It won't be hard to find. Now there was a voice, a very low voice. Injun Joe's. Damn, maybe she got company. There's lights, late as it is. I can't see any. This was that stranger's voice. The stranger of the haunted house. A deadly chill went to Huck's heart. This, then, was the revenge job. His thought was to fly. Then he remembered that the Widow Douglas had been kind to him more than once, and maybe these men were going to murder her. He wished he dared venture to warn her, but he knew he didn't dare. They might come and catch him. He thought all this and more in the moment that elapsed between the stranger's remark and Injun Joe's next, which was, "Cause the bushes in your way. Now, this way. Now you see, don't you?" Yes, well, there is company there, I reckon. Better give it up. Give it up? And I just leaving this country forever? Give it up and maybe never have another chance. I'll tell you again, as I told you before, I don't care for swag, you may have it. But her husband was rough on me. Many times he was rough on me. And mainly, he was the justice of the peace that jugged me for a vagrant. That ain't all. It ain't a millionth part of it. He had me horsewhipped in front of the jail, like a Negro. With all the town looking on, horsewhipped. Do you understand? Took advantage of me and died. But I'll take it out on her. Oh, don't kill her. Don't do that. Kill? Who said anything about killing? I would kill him if he was here, but not her. When you want to get revenge on a woman, you don't kill her. Gosh, you go for looks. You slit her nostrils. You knot your ears like a sow. My God, that's keep your opinion to yourself. It will be safest for you. I'll tie her to the bed. If she bleeds to death, is that my fault? I'll not cry if she does. My friend, you'll help me in this thing for my sake. That's why you're here. I mightn't be able to alone. If you flinch, I'll kill you. Do you understand that? And if I have to kill you, I'll kill her. And then I reckon nobody will ever know much about who done this business. Well, if it's got to be done, let's get at it. Quicker the better. I'm all in a shiver. Do it now. Ain't company there. Look here. I'll get suspicious of you first thing you know. No, we'll wait till the lights are out. There's no hurry. Huck felt that a silence was going to ensue. A thing still more awful than any amount of murderous talk. So he held his breath and stepped gingerly back. Planted his foot carefully and firmly. After balancing one-legged in a precarious way and almost toppling over, first on one side and then on the other, he took another step back with the same elaboration and the same risks. Then another, and a twig snapped under his foot. His breath stopped, and he listened. There was no sound. The stillness was perfect. His gratitude was measureless. Now, he turned in his tracks, between the walls of sumac bushes, turned himself as carefully as if he were a ship, and then stepped away quickly, but cautiously along. When he emerged at the quarry, he felt secure. And so he picked up his nimble heels and flew. Down, down he sped, till he reached the Welshman's. He banged at the door, and presently the heads of the old man and his two stalwart sons were thrust from windows. What's the row there? Who's banging? What do you want? Let me in, quick! I'll tell you everything. Why? Who are you? Huckleberry Finn, quick, let me in! Huckleberry Finn, indeed. That ain't a name to open many doors, I judge. But let him in, lads. Let's see what's the trouble. Please don't ever tell I told you, were Huck's first words when he got in. Please don't. I'd be killed. Sure, but the widow's been good friends to me sometimes, and I want to tell. I will tell if you'll promise you won't ever say it was me. George, he has got something to tell, or he wouldn't act so, exclaimed the old man. Out with it. And nobody here ever tell, lad. 3 minutes later, the old man and his sons, well armed, were up the hill, and just entering the sumac path on tiptoe, their weapons in their hands. Huck accompanied them no further. He hid behind a great boulder and fell to listening. There was a lagging, anxious silence, and then, all of a sudden, there was an explosion of firearms and a cry. Huck waited for no particulars. He sprang away and sped down the hill as fast as his legs could carry him. Remember, this is a child. There's no cowardice in this. That was doing all the right thing, going to find people that can actually help, and then getting himself out of trouble. This is nothing to be worried about running off. All right, that brings us to the end of chapter 29. Let's see. Let's try and get one more in tonight. It'll probably make sure that we're not going to run over on Friday if we do it that way. So let's continue now with chapter 30. As the earliest suspicion of dawn appeared on Sunday morning, Huck came groping up the hill and rapped gently at the old Welshman's door. The inmates were asleep, but it was a sleep that was set on a hair trigger on account of the exciting episode of the night. A call came from a window. "Who's there?" Huck's scared voice answered in a low tone. "Please, let me in. It's only Huck Finn." "It's a name that can open this door night or day, lad, and welcome." These were strange words to the vagabond boy's ears, and the pleasantest he had ever heard. He could not recollect that the closing word had ever been applied in his case before. The door was quickly unlocked, and he entered. Huck was given a seat, and the old man and his brace of tall sons speedily dressed themselves. "Now, my boy, you're good and hungry, because breakfast will be ready as soon as the sun's up, and we'll have a piping hot one too. Make yourself easy about that. I and the boys hoped you'd turn up and stop here last night." I was awful scared," said Huck, "and I'll run. I took out when the pistols went off, and I didn't stop for 3 miles. I come now because I want to know about it, you know. I come before daylight because I didn't want to cross them devils, even if they was dead." "Well, poor chap, you do look as if you've had a hard night of it. But there's a bed here for you when you've had your breakfast." "No, they ain't dead, lad. We are sorry enough for that. You see, we knew right where to put our hands on them by your description, so we crept along on tiptoe till we got within 15 feet of them. Dark as a cellar that sumac path was. And just when I found I was going to sneeze. It was the meanest kind of luck. I tried to keep it back, but no use. It was bound to come. And it did come. I was in the lead with my pistol raised, and when the sneeze started, those scoundrels were rustling to get out of the path. I sung out, 'Fire, boys!' And they blazed away at the place where the rustling was. So did the boys, but they were off in a jiffy. Those villains, and we after them, down through the woods. I judge we never touched them. They fired a shot apiece as they started, but their bullets whizzed by and didn't do us any harm. Soon as we lost the sound of their feet and we quit chasing, went down and stirred up the constables. They got a posse together and went off to guard the riverbank. And as soon as it was light, the sheriff and a gang were going to beat up the woods. My boys will be with them presently. I wish we had some sort of description of those rascals. It would help a good deal. But you couldn't see what they were like in the dark, lad, I suppose." "Oh, yes, I saw them downtown and followed them." "Splendid! Describe them, my boy." "One's the old deaf and dumb Spaniard that's been around here once or twice. And the other's a mean-looking ragged. That's enough, lad. We know the men. Happened on them in the woods back of the widows one day. They slunk away. Off with you, boys, and tell the sheriff. Get your breakfast tomorrow morning." The Welshman's sons departed at once. As they were leaving the room, Huck sprang up and exclaimed, "Oh, please don't tell anybody it was me that blowed on them, please." "All right, if you say it, Huck. But you ought to have the credit of what you did." "Oh, no, please don't tell." When the young men were gone, the old Welshman said, "They won't tell. I won't. Why don't you want to know?" Huck would not explain, further than to say that he already knew too much about one of those men, and would not have the man know that he knew anything against him for the whole world. He would be killed for knowing it for sure. And the old man promised secrecy once more, and said, "How'd you come to follow these fellows, lad? Were they looking suspicious?" Huck was silent for a while, as he framed a duly cautious reply. Then he said, "Well, you see, I'm kind of a hard lot. At least everybody says so. I don't see nothing agin it, and sometimes I can't sleep much on account of thinking about it and sort of trying to strike out a new way of doing. That was the way it was last night. I couldn't sleep, and so I come along up street about midnight. I turned it all over, and when I got to that old Shackley brick store by the Temperance Tavern, I bucked up agin the wall, to have another think. Well, just then along comes these two chaps slipping along close by me, with something under their arm. I reckon they'd stole it. One was a smoking, and the other wanted a light. So they stopped right before me, and the cigars lit up their faces, and I see that the big one and the deaf dumb Spaniard by his white whiskers and the patch on his eye, and the other was a rusty, ragged-looking devil. Could you see the rags by the light of the cigars? This staggered Huck for a moment. Then he said, "Well, I don't know, but somehow it seems as if I did." Then they went on, and you followed them. Yes, that was it. I wanted to see what was up. They sneaked along, so I dogged them to the widow's stile. Stood in the dock and heard the ragged one beg for the widder. And the Spaniards swear he'd spile her looks just as I told you and your two. What? The deaf and dumb man said all that? Huck had made another terrible mistake. He was trying his best to keep the old man from getting the faintest hint of who the Spaniard might be. Yet his tongue seemed determined to get him into trouble in spite of all he could do. He made several efforts to creep out of his scrape, but the old man's eye was upon him, and he made blunder after blunder. Presently, the Welshman said, "My boy, don't be afraid of me. I wouldn't hurt a hair of your head for all the world. No, I'd protect you. I'd protect you. This Spaniard is not deaf and dumb. You've let that slip without intending it. You can't cover that up now. You know something about that Spaniard that you want to keep dark. Now trust me. Tell me what it is, and trust me, I won't betray you." Huck looked into the old man's honest eyes a moment, then bent over and whispered in his ear, "'Tain't a Spaniard. It's Injun Joe." The Welshman almost jumped out of his chair. In a moment he said, "It's all plain enough now. When you talked about notching ears and slitting noses, I judged that that was your own embellishment, because white men don't take that sort of revenge. But an Injun, that's a different matter altogether." Okay, calm down now. During breakfast, the talk went on, and in the course of it, the old man said that the last thing which he and his sons had done before going to bed was to get a lantern and examine the stile and its vicinity for marks of blood. They found none, but captured a bulky bundle of what? If the words had been lightning, they could not have leaped with a more stunning suddenness from Huck's blanched lips. His eyes were staring wide now, and his breath suspended, waiting for the answer. The Welshman started, stared in return. 3 seconds, 5 seconds, 10, then replied, "The burglar's tools. Why, what's the matter with you?" Huck sank back, panting gently but deeply, unutterably grateful. The Welshman eyed him gravely, curiously, and presently said, "Yes, burglar's tools. That appears to relieve you a good deal. What did give you that turn? What were you expecting we'd found?" Huck was in a close place. The inquiring eye was upon him. He would have given anything for material for a plausible answer. Nothing suggested itself. The inquiring eye was boring deeper and deeper. A senseless reply offered. There was no time to weigh it, so at a venture he uttered it, feebly. "Sunday school books, maybe." Poor Huck was too distressed to smile, but the old man laughed loud and joyously, shook up the details of his anatomy from head to foot, and ended by saying that such a laugh was money in a man's pocket, because it cut down the doctor's bill like everything. Then he added, "Oh, old chap, you're white and jaded. You ain't well a bit. No wonder you're a little flighty and off your balance. But you'll come out of it. Rest and sleep will fetch you out all right, I hope." Huck was irritated to think he had been such a goose and betrayed such a suspicious excitement, for he had dropped the idea that the parcel brought from the tavern was the treasure. As soon as he had heard talk at the widow's stile, he had only thought it was not the treasure. However, he had not known that it wasn't, and so the suggestion of a captured bundle was too much for his self-possession. But on the whole, he felt glad the little episode had happened, for now he knew beyond all question that the bundle was not the bundle. and so his mind was at rest, and exceedingly comfortable. In fact, everything seemed to be drifting just in the right direction now. The treasure must be still in number 2. The men would be captured and jailed that day, and he and Tom could seize the gold that night without any trouble or any fear of interruption. Just as breakfast was completed, there was a knock at the door. Huck jumped for a hiding place, for he had no mind to be connected even remotely with the late event. The Welshman admitted several ladies and gentlemen, among them the widow Douglas, and noticed that groups of citizens were climbing up the hill to stare at the stile. So the news had spread. The Welshman had to tell the story of the night to the visitors. The widow's gratitude for her preservation was outspoken. "Don't say a word about it, madam. There's another that you're more beholden to than you are to me and my boys. Maybe, but he don't allow me to tell his name. We wouldn't have been here but for him." Of course, this excited a curiosity so vast that it almost belittled the main matter, but the Welshman allowed it to eat into the vitals of his visitors, and through them be transmitted to the whole town, for he refused to part with his secret. When all else had been learned, the widow said, "I went to sleep, reading in bed, and slept straight through all that noise. Why didn't you come and wake me?" "We judged it weren't worthwhile. Those fellows weren't likely to come again. They hadn't any tools left to work with, and what was the use of waking you up and scaring you to death? My 3 Negro men stood guard at your house all the rest of the night. They've just come back." Quick aside, that is the first time that word has been written in the book. Every other time that's been said has had to be a quick substitution. I like this Welshman. More visitors came, and the story had to be told and retold for a couple hours more. There was no Sabbath school during day school vacation, but everybody was early at church. The stirring event was well canvassed. News came that not a sign of the 2 villains had been yet discovered. When the sermon was finished, Judge Thatcher's wife dropped alongside of Mrs. Harper as she moved down the aisle with the crowd and said, "Is my Becky going to sleep all day? I just expected she would be tired to death." "Your Becky?" "Yes." With a startled look, "Didn't she stay with you last night?" "Why, no." Mrs. Thatcher turned pale and sank into a pew. Just as Aunt Polly, talking briskly with a friend, passed by, Aunt Polly said, "Good morning, Miss Thatcher. Good morning, Miss Harper. I've got a boy that's turned up missing. I reckon my Tom stayed at your house last night. One of you. And now he's afraid to come to church. I've got to settle with him." Mrs. Thatcher shook her head feebly and turned paler than ever. "He didn't stay with us," said Mrs. Harper, beginning to look uneasy. A marked anxiety came into Aunt Polly's face. "Joe Harper, have you seen my Tom this morning?" "No." "When did you see him last?" Joe tried to remember, but he could not say. The people had stopped moving out of church, whispers passed along, and a boding uneasiness took possession of every countenance. Children were anxiously questioned, and young teachers. They all said they had not noticed whether Tom and Becky were on board the ferryboat on the homeward trip. It was dark, and no one thought of inquiring if anyone was missing. One young man finally blurted out his fear that they were still in the cave. Mrs. Thatcher swooned away. Aunt Polly fell to crying and wringing her hands. The alarm swept from lip to lip, from group to group, from street to street. And within 5 minutes, the bells were wildly clanging and the whole town was up. The Cardiff Hill episode sank into instant insignificance. The burglars were forgotten, horses were saddled, skiffs were manned, the ferryboat ordered out, and before the horror was half an hour old, 200 men were pouring down the high road and river toward the cave. All the long afternoon, the village seemed empty and dead. Many women visited Aunt Polly and Mrs. Thatcher and tried to comfort them. They cried with them too, and that was still better than words. All the tedious night, the town waited for news. But when the morning dawned at last, all the word that came was send more candles and send food. Mrs. Thatcher was almost crazed, and Aunt Polly also. Judge Thatcher sent messages of hope and encouragement from the cave. They conveyed no real cheer. The old Welshman came home toward daylight, spattered with candle grease, smeared with clay, and almost worn out. He found Huck still in the bed that had been provided for him and delirious with fever. The physicians were all at the cave, so the widow Douglas came and took charge of the patient. She said she would do her best by him, because whether he was good, bad, or indifferent, he was the Lord's, and nothing that was the Lord's was a thing to be neglected. The Welshman said Huck had good spots in him, and the widow said, you can depend on it, that's the Lord's mark. He don't leave it off, he never does. Puts it somewhere on every creature that comes from his hands. Early in the forenoon, parties of jaded men began to straggle into the village, but the strongest of the citizens continued searching. All the news that could be gained was that remoteness of the cavern were being ransacked, that had never been visited before, and that every corner and crevice was going to be thoroughly searched. That wherever one wandered through the mazes of passages, lights were to be seen flitting hither and thither in the distance, and shoutings and pistol shots sent their hollow reverberations to the ear down the somber aisles. In one place, far from the section usually traversed by tourists, the names Becky and Tom had been found traced upon the rocky wall with candle smoke, and near at hand a grease-soiled bit of ribbon. Mrs. Thatcher recognized the ribbon and cried over it. She said it was the last relic she should ever have of her child, and that no other memorial of her could ever be so precious, because this one parted latest from the living body before the awful death came. Some said that now and then in the cave a faraway speck of light would glimmer, and then a glorious shout would burst forth, and a score of men go trooping down the echoing aisle, and then a sickening disappointment would always follow. The children were not there. It was only a searcher's light. 3 dreadful days and nights dragged their tedious hours along, and the village sank into a hopeless stupor. No one had heart for anything. The accidental discovery just made that the proprietor of the Temperance Tavern kept liquor on his premises scarcely fluttered the public pulse, tremendous as the fact was in a lucid interval. Huck feebly led up to the subject of taverns, and finally asked, dimly dreading the worst, if anything had been discovered at the Temperance Tavern since he had been ill. Yes, said the widow. Huck started up in bed, wild-eyed. What? What was it? Liquor! And the place has been shut up. Lie down, child. What a turn you did give me. Only, tell me just one thing. Only just one, please. Was it Tom Sawyer that found it? The widow burst into tears. Hush! Hush, child, hush! I told you before, you must not talk. You are very, very sick. Then, nothing but liquor had been found. There would have been a great powwow if it had been the gold. So the treasure was gone forever. Gone forever! What could she be crying about? Curious that she should cry. These thoughts worked their dim way through Huck's mind, and under the weariness they gave him he fell asleep. The widow said to herself, There, he's fast asleep. Poor wreck. Tom Sawyer find it? Pity, but somebody could find Tom Sawyer. Oh, there ain't many left now that's got hope enough, or strength enough either, to go on searching. And that brings us to the end of chapter 30. And right about on time, too. So we've got about 15% left tonight, or left to go of the book, which will leave us, just about spot on. We'll have probably a short reading on Friday to get to the end of this, and that'll give us some time to just talk and chat and maybe have an early night of it. But things have definitely heated up. Any complaints I may have had about it being nothing but whimsy and wanderings and childish misadventures are put to rest after tonight. It's been a lot actually happening. Plot has come in full force for the ending of the book. So, yeah. Yeah, you called it spot on. The only reason we even went over it all was because we've had little side chats here and there over the course of the night. So, we fit this in pretty nicely. So, we will go ahead and call this an evening. We will be back on Friday for a regularly scheduled time where we will see the end of The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. It should get us to nice round 5. That's not too bad. Exactly. You gotta... There's some chapters here and there that don't seem to mean much of anything. Some side distractions and detours make the actual plot hit that much harder. It's a good way to think on it. So, all right, let's go ahead and wrap up here. We've had our chat through the course of the night, so we can leave off a little bit for this evening. So, once again, and always, as always, thank you very much for joining us. I hope everyone's been having a fun time as we go through the Adventures of Tom Sawyer. And with that, good night. Until next time, Friday we will resume and complete the Adventures of Tom Sawyer. Bye now.